All right, for real this time. We'll do it live. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. The Illinois State Fair officially underway in Springfield. And the Twilight Parade last night featuring some of the constitutional officers. You saw the governor there, Susana Mendoza, the state comptroller, Attorney General Kwame Raoul, the Illinois State Historical Military Museum, showing off some of their goods, and many, many more organizations. Of course, the fair's a pretty big deal. But that's just one of the activities going on today. A ton going all throughout the weekend into all next week in Springfield for the Illinois State Fair. A lot to take in there. Not just the agricultural exhibits, but also plenty of food and entertainment. Myself, I got tickets to go see Smashing Pumpkins, so that's going to be fun. But lots to get to here with Illinois in Focus. We'll actually talk about election integrity. That's going to be coming up a little bit later on with a live interview. Also, we'll talk about, out of Kankakee County, some migrant crime that's happening, and also the idea of, if Donald Trump gets elected, how does local law enforcement in Illinois work with the Trump administration in order to bring about mass deportations. So we'll hear a little bit about that. But up next, we got to tackle the latest in the back and forth of the Sonia Massey shooting and the aftermath thereof. So that's coming up here with Illinois in Focus Daily.
Process moving forward. I've not heard from anybody specifically about hearings, but I'm sure the issue will, as you and I both know, will come up in the veto session in the spring session, and that's fine. And having a conversation about this is an important thing to do. I certainly don't want to, diminish any of that and say that it's not an important issue for us to discuss, because I think it is. With that said, I hate for the situation to be politicized. And that's what I feel like some of this is occurring now. And I think that, again, let's focus on how we can make things better for everybody.
That's Illinois Sheriff's Association Executive Director Jim Kychek in a conversation I had with him yesterday in the aftermath of what kinds of reforms could be possible after the Sonia Massey shooting last month when it comes to police employment scrutiny and screenings. Welcome in Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for being part of the program each and every weekday morning with Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us as we get you what you need to know to start your day. And this has been an ongoing story really since July 6th here in Springfield. Sonia Massey called about a suspected prowler in the early morning hours, and sheriff's deputies arrived to respond, go into the home, and ultimately the situation ended up with one of the sheriff's deputies shooting and killing Sonia Massey. And obviously that sheriff's deputy was fired and charged with murder. But since then, there's been ongoing questions about what kinds of reforms there could be. Governor J.B. Pritzker's been asked about this all week at different unrelated events. Even yesterday, after cutting the ribbon at the Illinois State Fair, he was asked about what kinds of reforms there could be in the aftermath of all of this.
There's so much more to do. And I met with the Massey family, so did the Lieutenant Governor. We listened to what they had to say about what ought to happen. I've certainly heard what some legislators think, and there are ideas that are floating around. I don't think there's a bill that anybody's put together. It's hard to tell exactly what could be done, especially when there isn't transparency in the sheriff's department about how this person was hired after the sheriff's deputy resigned over and over again, couldn't hold a job at a department, a law enforcement department. And then I just want to add at the end, let's all acknowledge that the vast majority of our law enforcement officers do the right thing. And we ought to praise them for that. And then when someone doesn't do the right thing, we need to hold them accountable. And that is what is happening right now with Sonia Massey's killing. So I want to praise the state's attorney. I want to praise the ISP and everybody who's been involved, even in the peaceful protests, who have tried to call attention to this matter to make sure that people here in the state of Illinois, all across the state, as well as around the country, pay attention to this so that it doesn't happen again here or anywhere. And
there is a lot of attention on this. Again, President Joe Biden has been asked about this, and he's commented on it. You had former President Donald Trump asked about it, and he's commented on it. So it's obviously raised awareness about the issues. But what are the issues? Obviously, this sheriff's deputy, Sean Grayson, had a checkered employment history. And there's questions that Governor Pritzker says that Sangamon County Sheriff Jack Campbell has not answered. And he's been saying all week that Campbell needs to resign. Calls that Campbell's refused to accept, saying that he's working to find the best ways to make sure that bad actors don't get into policing. But here's more from Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday.
Well, we don't know all the circumstances about why Sean Grayson was hired. And this is one of the most frustrating things about the situation now. The sheriff could have made this more transparent, has refused to do so. Why was Sean Grayson hired? Nobody can answer that question except the sheriff and his HR folks. We ought to see them talk to us about it. Meanwhile, the shortage of labor is not limited to police. It's in fact in every industry. We've seen it. It's getting better. And in fact, we've had more and more people working in the state of Illinois. The recovery has been terrific from the nadir of the COVID-19 pandemic recession. And so we've seen more and more people applying. There are more applications and more opportunities to be hired. But only people who meet the qualifications should be hired, and they should be screened. References should be made. That's how it should be done.
So what does that process look like? I talked with Jim Kajcek. He is the executive director of the Illinois Sheriff's Association. And yesterday he laid out in detail the general line of how somebody gets into law enforcement, in particular to work for a sheriff's office. And there are a lot of hoops that people have to jump through.
Well, I mean, you're going to have there's certainly there are minimum qualifications that any officer in the state of Illinois has to have, and those are set by statute. So you have to be, for example, 21 years of age. You have to not be convicted of a felony. You have to be eligible to be able to receive a FOID card, things like that. That's kind of the basic parameters for application. From that point in time, counties over 1 million people in population have to have what's called, for sheriff's offices, they have to have what's called a Sheriff's Merit Commission. Other counties in the state that are below 1 million can have them, but they're not required to by law. Although a lot of them do set them up, and they set them up by ordinance through their county boards. Sangamon County, for example, would have a merit commission. So from that point in time, there's variance, Greg, from location to location about how the hiring process works. But generally speaking, many of them will have you apply their application, they'll evaluate the application, see if you're eligible. In a lot of cases, there will be a written test that they have to pass. There will be a physical test called the power test that they have to pass. From that point in time, many will also then go through a psychological exam that they're evaluated on to see if they're an eligible candidate to be able to handle being in law enforcement. Some may also go through either in addition to or alternatively, they may take a polygraph. From that point in time, if they pass all those stages, then they would be considered eligible to be hired by that agency. From that point in time, and the Merit Commission would approve that eligibility list, indicating that they passed those different components and that they were up for consideration at that point in time for potential hire. Then the sheriff's office would make a decision about who they want to hire. From that point in time, they would then enroll in the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. And there are several academies across the state. And they would submit that information and that request to the Illinois Law Enforcement Trainings and Standards Board to make sure that that person had, an appropriate background check. They checked their background as well as the agency that was hiring them. And from that point in time, they enroll in the academy. And now the academy is 16 weeks. They have to, if they don't pass the academy, obviously they're out. At the end of the academy, they then have a state exam that they have to take, that they have to pass a minimum of 70%. From there, then they go through what's called a field training process within the agency that they're hired. That could be a lot of in classroom when they make it to the new agency. It also is obviously going to be hands-on field experience from there. And then when they're completed with that, then they're released to go work as a deputy.
So clearly, a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through in order for somebody to even be hired. They have to pass all these exams and then go through a merit commission that gives the green light, and then references and such can be checked. But the governor yesterday again was talking a lot about the hiring process and was critical of it, though he said that he wasn't sure of what kinds of reform statewide there could be.
Remember that it's near impossible when you say someone resigned from a position, right? It's near impossible to make a judgment unless there's more of a report that's been, as you say, has been passed from one department to another. But there's a lot of protecting people. What happens is they do something wrong in a department, and the department head, the HR department, decides, well, they don't want to affect this person's career going forward. So instead of holding them accountable at that department and having a record of that, they'll just quietly recommend that they resign. And that is how you see somebody moving from position to position. Now, should they do more? Absolutely. Those local departments should be held accountable if there was wrongdoing at the department that went unreported, and instead the person was suggested to simply resign. But again, these are questions that a sheriff who's hiring somebody ought to be asking. I don't know whether he asked those questions. It seems to me he could not have. If he had, he would have learned a lot. Someone who moves from job to job, 1 year, half a year, and does it 6 times over the course of a few years, and whose record coming out of the military is questionable. I think those are all things that ought to be taken into account. I want to know, and all of us, I think, want to know why the sheriff didn't take those things into account or dive deeper into those questions. It seems like there were cursory conversations because a resignation, well, that seems benign.
So having posed that situation to Jim Kychek, the executive director of the Illinois Sheriff's Association, he said that there could be some possible fixes here with the overall vetting process.
Well, I think that, yes, I think there are some things that probably certainly, I mean, we're going to evaluate all of this, Greg. Do I have an answer for you specifically as to what could or should be changed yet? No, but we're going to go through a process to try to, examine that thoroughly and make sure that we can make changes that are going to be helpful to the profession and bring more good people back in. With that said, in terms of this individual, yes, 3 of the agencies that he was hired at were all part-time. So I think you got to take into consideration a part-time person may work at 2 or 3 different jurisdictions at the same time. And I'm not picking specifically on him, but obviously if that's a part-time gig, maybe they have to do that because they're not hired full-time anywhere else for a different profession or whatever. So they may just be doing that to make ends meet. And I think you look for at that point in time, opportunities on a full-time basis where, a lot of the motivation is, I'd like to continue to quote unquote move up, right? I'd like to go to a bigger agency each time I go to something where I think I've got more opportunities. And that's generally, a path of, law enforcement as a whole. If I'm an officer, those are the kind of things that I'm seeking to be able to do for myself. In this particular case, I can't speak to all of the details behind the scene because I don't know them. I know what I've read, but I can tell you that the information behind there, in terms of providing information, maybe there's a process where we have to, there has to be a release of information provided by that individual, the applicant, that says, hey, give all my information out. And then the agency that has the information, make sure that they make the request that's required. I think there's some things that could be looked at there. But again,
and this is all something that could be discussed in the months ahead leading into the fall veto session and even early next year with spring session. But what about those calls for Jack Campbell, the Sangamon County Sheriff, to resign? The executive director of the Illinois Sheriff's Association, Jim Kychek, reacting to that.
First of all, the sheriff is elected, right? I mean, there's a process to go through. They're not appointed. They are elected. And unfortunately, sometimes people have employees that do bad things. Under those circumstances, should the person that is overseeing those employees, if they're the head of the agency, should they be forced to resign in all those circumstances? That's probably not an appropriate thing. I support Sheriff Campbell. I mean, I think Sheriff Campbell, if you know him, he is a sincere, quality individual. And I can tell you that unequivocally, that this situation is not something that he is taking lightly by any stretch of the imagination, and he wants to make things better and make things right. And I think he deserves an opportunity to stay in that office to be able to do so. So from my perspective, let's look at what we can do to build better moving forward, as opposed to sitting here and continuing to talk about, what happened in the past. I certainly don't want to diminish again, the death of Sonia Massey, because it was horrible. It is horrible, and I feel horrible for the family and all those involved. But at the same time, I think that, it's an incident that it has occurred, and we need to be able to, take that incident and figure out, what went wrong, why did it go wrong, and let's try to not have those things happen again in the future. And I think Sheriff Campbell, nobody's going to be closer to the situation than he is. And if we're going to make improvements, he's the guy to be able to help us get there.
So fascinating conversation. Obviously, we'll follow up on all of that and more. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for being here each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for Illinois in Focus Daily. Stand by as we line up a live guest here with Illinois in Focus Daily.
For years I wondered, why are they allowing these people to come in at levels like this? It was incredible. And I said two reasons. They're either really stupid, and I don't believe they're stupid, because anybody that can cheat in elections like they cheat is not stupid. Or, in the alternative, they have bad motives or they hate our country. And I used to think they hate our country, but lately I've seen where they're trying to sign these people up to vote. And they have to stop. They cannot let illegal immigrants vote in this upcoming election.
That's former President Donald Trump during an hour-long impromptu press conference yesterday, where he took a whole host of questions, including one about his efforts to essentially deport a ton of criminal illegal aliens, and even raised the concern about the consequence of are these undocumented citizens going to be registering to vote? Well, what are some of the other concerns in the state of Illinois when it comes to election integrity and ballot integrity? Something I definitely want to keep following up here, because we got less than 90 days. And joining us right now is the Tazewell County Clerk, John Ackerman. He is, of course, at the forefront of all of this. He's been prominent in the conversations about a possible move to ranked choice voting and a whole host of other conversations. John, thanks for taking time with us today. You held a forum with several other clerks and elections officials with concerns about ballot integrity. Go ahead and tell us what you guys discussed yesterday.
Well, yeah, yesterday's event, which featured the election authorities from McLean, Peoria, and Tazewell County, was an opportunity, a roundtable discussion opportunity for the local media to ask questions that they had, their readers and their viewers, what questions they'd brought forward, and to hear our reaction to those questions being presented. I thought the forum went over real well, covered like you said, a large array of topics all around the topic of election integrity.
So what were some of the main things that clerks and elections officials are concerned about in the state of Illinois?
Well, I think, again, it varied widely, but I think the overwhelming theme was we're losing trust in our elections process. You could look back to 2016 when we blamed it on Russians hacking. We migrated it in 2020 to other individuals could hack the election or change the results. But the theme is the same. The problem is lack of trust in our elections. And the cure to that is local election authorities throughout the state of Illinois stepping forward to be completely, fully transparent, to open our offices, to open our doors, to explain to the public the procedures and policies that are in place that safeguard our elections and the steps that we take to make sure that we are following those rules. My colleagues throughout the state of Illinois since 2020, since before that, have really stepped up each year and gotten more and more aggressive with being transparent, making sure that the public sees and hears from us, and make sure that they know that we are trusted sources of information on how the elections are run here within the state of Illinois. And that really is the cure to the disease of having lack of faith in our elections process.
We're talking with Tazewell County Clerk John Ackerman here with Illinois in Focus Daily. And John, you didn't necessarily hear the former president when I played that clip, but he did talk about the concerns of non-citizen migrants being able to register to vote. Now, that might be an inflated concern, but is it really, when you look at, for instance, in Chicago, can't non-citizens vote in local school council races? What's being done in the state of Illinois to ensure that non-citizens are not voting in our elections?
Yeah, well, in municipalities that have elected to have non-citizens vote in their local elections, those voter lists, that's separate from the voter list that we use for federal and state elections. Non-citizens are not allowed anywhere in the United States to vote in federal elections. As far as state elections, I don't believe they're allowed to vote in state elections anywhere in the United States, but I could be wrong on that one. There are local municipalities that have allowed them to vote on local races, mayor, school board. School board's most often where we see that argument being placed. Although some of those have been reversed or overturned by the courts. So I think that question's still out there as far as how that would be allowed long term. As far as how do we safeguard to make sure that if they're voting in local races, that they're not voting in our federal and our state elections. Again, there are different databases allowing them to do that, different voters lists that are being applied. When they go to the polls to sign, when they go to register, they still have to bring multiple forms of identification, one of which is their residency. So they're going through all the steps, and on all the voter registration forms throughout the state and throughout the nation, they are clicking, and when they register, that they are a U.S. citizen. I don't have as much concern about non-citizens who illegally cross the border coming to vote, because we know when they cross the border, when coyotes are bringing them into the United States, they're giving them fact sheets of where they can pick up supplies, what communities are the most friendliest towards them, that are the most opening to them. That's why they're migrating to cities like Chicago, New York, other areas that are welcoming them. On that list, as well as things that they need to be aware of, how to avoid circumstances that could get them deported. These individuals are wanting to be here. They're not wanting to take a chance of being deported. So the idea that some political party is going to get electors to vote for them for one election for their own personal benefit, what benefit is it to the illegal that's crossing the border? To them, that exposes them to an extraordinary amount of risk that they will be caught and be immediately deported back to the country they come from. And that is what they're running away from, what they're trying to hide from. So there's need for us to be resilient and making sure that we are following procedures and policies that are in place to prevent that. But I just don't see that being an overwhelming challenge right now.
John, we also have, the election season, I think, as some have characterized it. It's no longer election day. Early voting starts, in 45 days or so, if not less. But you also have to, take in those mail-in ballots 2 weeks after the election closes. Does that help or hurt what you initially talked about of the electorate having confidence in the electoral process?
I don't think it should hurt the electorate having confidence in our election process. I think, again, when we sit down and we explain the policies and procedures that are in place to safeguard our elections, they're even more built up on vote by mail. There are more check points involved in that process. So I think voters should have confidence when the policies and procedures are being followed throughout the state of Illinois. We do have the necessary safeguards in place to make sure that this is being done correctly. My overwhelming concern right now with vote by mail is not on us as election authorities. I am confident my colleagues throughout the state of Illinois, we are going to do everything that is necessary to successfully manage the increasing volume of vote by mail. My concern is right now is with the United States Postal Service. We are witnessing throughout the nation, election authorities are, problems with the timely delivery of mail by the United States Postal Service. It's something we are trying to bring forward to congressional leadership throughout the state of Illinois. We saw in the primary increased delays which caused individuals' votes not to be counted because their ballots were received too late. That needs to be addressed immediately. There is no reason for some of these roadblocks that have been put up with the Postal Service's timely delivery of mail. One example I brought up at yesterday's press event, we had a ballot that a citizen in our county cast on March the 19th, 1 block from my office at the post office. We know they got it from there because it was a metered stamp that they bought at the counter that was placed on the vote by mail ballot. So 1 block from my office, March the 19th, they drop off their ballot. Everything's good. That ballot was delivered to our office on June the 20th. 1 block away is all they had to move it, and they still could not get it to us in a timely fashion. The excuse was it got lost in transit as it left our county and went to a regional distribution facility. There's no need for that to have happened. That ballot should have been kept by the local post office and delivered directly to us. So my concern is with the post office, with recent changes to the distribution of mail that has caused for time delays. I really hope that that's something our congressional leadership addresses and fixes before we get to the November election.
Talking with John Ackerman, he's the Tazewell County Clerk. One final question here about that mail-in ballot process. Of course, you know, the practice of ballot harvesting in Illinois. I believe that when somebody delivers ballots to the clerk directly, there's a process, but you have to check and make sure the signature matches the signature of whoever signed it over. That doesn't happen, though, when somebody goes and physically turns in ballots to the post office. Is that a loophole here that's concerning?
Well, your question is both accurate and inaccurate a bit. Let me correct it here real quick. They still have to sign the ballot, and we still go through checking that signature to verify that the individual who submitted the ballot is the accurate one. The step that's missing is, you're right, they have to, if somebody else is delivering your ballot to the election authority, they have to fill out the affidavit. They don't have to do that if the post office is delivering it to us, or if they're utilizing a drop box. So there is a little bit of a loophole there, but as far as the security of the ballot itself, the voter still has to sign the ballot that they are casting. So there is, again, that safeguard in place there.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I greatly appreciate you taking the time with us this morning with Illinois in Focus Daily, and we'll definitely have to stay in touch as we get closer to the election, but also even after the election because of the ongoing conversation about ranked choice voting. So John Ackerman, Tazewell County Clerk and Recorder of Deeds, greatly appreciate you being here with Illinois in Focus Daily.
Thank you.
All right, stay tuned. We've got more here, and be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell each and every weekday morning, and you can stay up to date with what's going on in Illinois, the land of Lincoln, and live interviews, analysis, deep dives into all of this and more. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. All right, stand by. appreciate your patience. Stand by as we prepare to talk with Kankakee County Sheriff Mike Downey.
Probably.
We are going to start the largest mass deportation in the history of our country because we have no choice. It's not sustainable. And we are going to start with violent criminals, and we're going to start then with criminals. And our local police is going to work with us because they know everything about the people. They know their names. They know everything about them. They know their middle name. They know their numbers. We should not have sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities is a way of protecting criminals, and we should not have sanctuary cities.
Former President Donald Trump yesterday during that impromptu news conference talking about how he's going to, if elected, conduct mass deportations, and he says that local police are going to be working with them. But in Illinois, there could be some problems with state law preventing local law enforcement from working with federal immigration authorities. To talk more about this, Mike Downey, he is the Kankakee County Sheriff, and I wanted to reach out to him because there's just a horrific story out of his county of a non-citizen migrant being accused of sexual assault. And how this impacts law enforcement, and love to hear from him what he's hearing from some of his colleagues across the state. So, Mike, thanks for taking time with us here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. First, give us an update on the latest crime that's really getting a lot of people's attention of that non-citizen migrant you guys have pressed charges against.
So, good morning, Greg, and thanks for having me. Yesterday morning, I believe it was early morning, we got a call to the hospital for a tender-aged female who was complaining of pain in the groin area. And through our great work by our investigators, discovered that she was sexually assaulted by what is a stepdad in a sense. And so our investigators took that person into custody. He is currently sitting in our jail. And we processed him as we normally would. And he did not go to court on the day of his arrest. He went the next day because they were waiting on paperwork. But as it turns out, during that time, we received a detainer from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And that's how we discovered that he was here illegally, because otherwise we cannot ask their status of whether or not they're a U.S. citizen. We cannot communicate with ICE directly. And so the fact that they put this detainer on this individual is what really gave us the information that he was not here legally.
So obviously, when it comes to enforcing immigration detainers, how are you guys able to react to that? I mean, is it now that this individual is facing criminal charges, now can you then work with ICE to get this guy, I don't know, charged, go through the court process, or how does that work now?
Well, he will go through our court process. The problem is, no, we cannot communicate with ICE. We cannot even honor the detainer. So had he gone to court and for some reason the judge would have not detained him, he would have walked out of our building, and we could not have contacted ICE and said, hey, this guy's walking out of our building. He has a detainer. Come and arrest him. So there is literally no communication with ICE, and that's a problem statewide. Those individuals who are here illegally, who may have a detainer, local law enforcement and sheriffs especially, who are dealing with obviously jails, we have no ability to
enforcement. But again, as you've said, you guys, your hands are tied.
Our hands are tied in Illinois. In fact, and while I appreciate what the president's saying, and I agree that we should look at these individuals who have come here illegally and bring them back to their country of origin. In Illinois, that will be difficult to do just because of the laws that are in effect in Illinois, and that falls on obviously our Democratic legislature, basically, along with Governor Pritzker, who is the one who's somewhat created this problem by allowing all these individuals in our state. We are a direct pipeline from the city of Chicago. Interstate 57 runs right through Kankakee County. And so there are a number of those who are here illegally in our community already.
Mike, the most recent case you talked about is just one. How many other examples are there over the I don't know, whatever time period you've got of you guys getting a criminal charge against somebody and then finding out that they have a detention order from ICE?
Well, this is the first one that we've run into, but a lot of times if ICE, for whatever reason, who they're monitoring and who they're watching, if ICE doesn't issue a detainer on one of our arrests, we would have no idea, because by law, we can't even ask somebody's immigration status. And even if we could ask what their immigration status is, it's not like, there's any communication with ICE going on. So the sheriff's hands in Illinois, law enforcement's hands in Illinois are tied because of our sanctuary status and the laws that have been passed and signed by the governor that prevent us from dealing with ICE. And as you know, Kankakee was one of 3 counties at one point that housed ICE detainees, and the legislature and governor put a stop to that as well.
What are you hearing from your colleagues across the state? 102 counties. Surely this is something that you guys talk around coffee, right? I mean, you go to the local coffee shop, so to speak, quote unquote. But what are you hearing from your colleagues across the state?
Yeah, it's similar across the state. I mean, no sheriff is going to, usurp state law. I mean, it's difficult to do our job. I mean, our hands are tied in a number of ways, but when you're involving migrants and those here illegally, I mean, our hands are completely tied. And, I'm sure there are other examples of this things that have happened across the state that maybe weren't quite as serious. But, the bottom line in all this, Greg, is that, this poor 6-year-old girl who was a victim of such a heinous crime, this could have been prevented and should have been prevented. And unfortunately, it wasn't. So that's the frustrating part from law enforcement and what we're dealing with every day.
Mike, unrelated to this particular issue, since I've got you, and since the governor has made an issue of Sangamon County Sheriff Jack Campbell to resign in all of that situation, curious your thoughts on the Sonia Massey shooting death, the calls from the governor for Campbell to resign, and what kinds of reforms you think could be made to ensure that bad actors don't get into a sheriff's department.
Well, first of all, Greg, my thoughts and prayers are with the Massey family. When somebody calls the police and needs a police response for whatever reason, that person shouldn't end up dead, regardless of who they are. And it was a tragic mistake. Jack Campbell, who I know to be a stand-up individual, a great sheriff, and for the governor to call him out to say that he should resign is irresponsible on his part. The governor should stay in his lane and stop grandstanding and trying to appease his base. It's frustrating when the legislature has tied our hands on a number of issues, and the process that we use as sheriffs in hiring is somewhat universal statewide. I mean, we're trying to get the best people we can get to be police officers in the state of Illinois, and that's a difficult task now, because there is such a reduction in the number of people who want to work in the law enforcement area because of what Governor Pritzker has turned into Illinois as a pro-criminal, anti-law enforcement state. That's not taking away anything from what that officer did. That officer was completely wrong. And to Sheriff Campbell's credit, he fired him. He filed charges with the state's attorney. The state's attorney indicted him, and he is in jail right now, which is where he should be. And that's, that's what tools we have to utilize from this standpoint. Should that have happened to Miss Massey? Absolutely not. It shouldn't happen to anybody. But to sit up in Chicago and claim that the sheriff down in Springfield should resign because of something one of his officers did is absolutely ridiculous, and the governor needs to stay in his lane.
Mike Downey, the Kankakee County Sheriff, greatly appreciate you taking the time with us here with Illinois in Focus Daily, and we'll definitely be in touch to further the conversation on these issues and more. Have a great Friday, all right?
Anytime, Greg. You too. Thanks for allowing me to talk.
It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Find us here each and every weekday morning with America's Talking Network. YouTube, search for it on your podcast sites. Illinois in Focus Daily. Have yourselves a great rest of the day, and heading into the weekend, we'll see you back here on Monday.